Coming up on this week's edition of the Kev BKA Beloved Show, we got the Women's March Madness Tournament, a reaction to Russell Wilson and Justin Fields being on the Steelers, the JJ Redick and LeBron James podcast, and much, much more. But first, thank you everybody for listening. Do not forget to subscribe, rate, review, follow, leave 5 stars only. How you gonna leave anything but 5 stars? Come on now, you can't hate on us like that. So I'm in a weird spot with the women's tournament right now. As I am recording this podcast, the first 4 end games of the men's tournament are happening right to my right, and the women's games are the day after this podcast comes out. So I can't get in too deep as much as I really want to, but I should share my bracket a little bit with the good people just to let y'all kind of know where my head is at. I'm going to not go all 64 teams and break down every single games for the sake of not getting too monotonous on y'all, but I'll do a quick summary. So coming out of Region 1, my Elite 8 matchup ended up being the South Carolina Gamecocks versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I wanted that to be a significantly more competitive game until Notre Dame suffered yet another injury, and South Carolina looks like they're going to bulldoze everyone in their path until they get to that Elite 8 Final Four range. More on that later. Region 2, which is the craziest, messiest, most competitive region of the entire tournament. The whole selection committee is just, y'all wildin'. I like you, but you're wildin'. Just to name a few of the teams that are in here, we got Iowa, UCLA, Kansas State, and Colorado. I believe 3 of them have ranked in the top 3 of the AP top 25 at least one time during the season, so that's fun. My Elite 8 matchup there ended up being a rematch of last year's national championship, Iowa versus LSU. Region 3, this might be a little bit of wishful thinking here, but that Elite 8 matchup, my fingers are crossed. I'm praying to the basketball gods. And if you love basketball as much as I do, you should be too. We are all praying for Region 3's Elite 8 matchup to be USC versus UConn. Give us Paige Beckers versus Juju Watkins on the biggest stage of them all. We need it. We need it. We need it. And then Region 4, this is where I get the most surprising. I like Texas. I really do. But I got them in a Sweet 16 losing to Utah and Alyssa Peely, which, side note, before I continue, I owe a lot of people from last week an apologies. I'm usually really bad at pronouncing names and pronouncing a lot of stuff, enunciating this, that, and the third. But in order to remain respectful and to give the game the proper respect it deserves, that's no excuse for me. And I butchered Alyssa Peely's name really bad, as well as many others. So I'll start here. My dearest apologies from the bottom of my heart and top right of my kidney. But I've just seen this team in the biggest games of their season when they need their star player to play the best. She does. She always delivers. And I don't expect any different during this tournament. And then from the other side of that, we got Stanford, who I got also being an Elite 8 matchup for Region 4, which brings us to the Final Four. I got South Carolina winning over Notre Dame. Again, I really wish that was ended up being more competitive, but I just think too many injuries at that point. South Carolina already put the beats on them at the start of the season. It's going to be hard to overcome that South Carolina team at that point. Region 2, I got Iowa getting their revenge back from last season over LSU. I think that the downgrade in guard play is really going to come back to bite LSU in the butt in a game like this, where last year you had a little more depth and some bodies to like Caitlin Clark. That's not an advantage and a luxury you're going to have this time around. Region 3, I switched my pick on this at least 3 times. I ultimately landed on, I got UConn winning over USC, and I think this just comes down to experience. As much as we all love Juju, I think it's just hard for your first time through to be able to pull that off. And also, when you do the coaching matchups, Gino Auriemma has been coaching for 40 years in total at this point. Meanwhile, Lindsey Gottlieb, the head coach of the USC Trojans, is about 45 years old. So I think that experience is what's really going to come into play and what's going to end up giving UConn the edge and end up putting them in the Final Four. And then Region 4, my one not top 3 seed that makes it up, I got Utah make it into the Final Four, man. I really like this Utah team. I really like Alyssa. I really think they'll be able to put it off. And I am praying to see what that Cameron Brink matchup looks like, and I do not think Stanford is going to like the outcome. Final Four matchup, South Carolina versus Utah. I'm taking South Carolina. Now on the other side, Iowa versus UConn. I'm going with UConn. Caitlin Clark goes on a great run, makes it all the way to the Final Four, and then Paige Beckers and company sends her up to the WNBA with an L. Toodaloo. And then in the national championship, South Carolina versus UConn, I got to go with South Carolina, man. I know that's chalk, like what, 40% of the brackets are picking them, but for damn good reason. Like, sometimes the most popular answer is the most popular answer because it's correct. And we don't got to overthink this at all. We are looking at a juggernaut who, if not for the greatest game of the current best player in college basketball's career thus far, and a historically bad shooting night, we'd probably be talking about them trying to win their second title in 2 years. So yeah, let's not overthink this one. Give me Dawn Staley and the gang at South Carolina, winning it all for the national championship. Best of luck to all the ladies in the tournament. Cannot wait to enjoy this one. And obviously next week, when we're a little bit deeper, we'll be able to dive in, do a little more recap, and have a little more fun there. Quick break, and let's move on to the next topic. All right, so I decided to bring the Ask Me Anything segment back for this week's podcast. We got a little bit of downtime NFL-wise between now and draft season. Mock draft is not going to be ready till next week, so I said, all right, let's talk to the people. Let's see what y'all got to say. And luckily, y'all gave me some good questions to answer. So without further ado, if you want to submit a question to here on the podcast every single Monday on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, there will be a post saying, ask me anything. You submit your questions. You can hear it on the podcast just like this. What are some of the best sleeper free agent signings? So I got 3 for you. Number 1, we got Xavier McKinney going to the Packers. I think that he is one of the best defensive players that a lot of people don't talk about, mainly because that Giants team was so bad last year. I know a lot of people talk about how today's DBs wouldn't be able to play in the pass era because they can't hit as well. They're not talking about Xavier McKinney, let me tell you. He is not in that category, and the Packers desperately needed that upgraded DB. I still don't understand how the Giants let him leave out the building, but no one knows what the Giants are doing these days, so Xavier McKinney will be my top sleeper. The next 2 are offensive linemen. Ooh, boring. Don't care. I love offensive line play here. Deal with it. The Titans signing center Lloyd Cushenberry to a 4-year deal, $50 million, half of which is fully guaranteed. Well, a little more than half is $26 million. I like that deal so much because with Will Levis coming along, we already see where his physical talent is. He can throw the ball over the moon, but with some of those line calls, making sure the protection's right, making sure his head stays on his body. Because as we saw last year, he's willing to hold the ball a little bit longer if it means he'll be able to take a deep shot. That's all fine and dandy, but if he's getting the protections wrong, holding the ball a little longer no longer means 3 seconds to 4 and now means 2 seconds to 3. Doesn't sound like much, but the difference between a second in a football play is an eternity in actual lifetime. Enter Lloyd Cushenberry. You bring a veteran center in there. He can make the line calls now, so Will Levis doesn't have to. Take a little bit of a load off his plate so you can look at him and say, hey, make your reads, throw the ball over a moon. We'll teach you all the other stuff later. I think that's a great addition that a lot of people are not going to talk about because most people don't understand that's what centers do, but that's what centers do. That's why centers are so important. Next, another offensive lineman, offensive guard, Kevin Zeitler. No, I'm not biased just because his name is also Kevin, but he's a great guard for the Baltimore Ravens, who, in my opinion, has been robbed of all-pro teams and Pro Bowl teams these past couple seasons. It is unbelievable that the Ravens let him walk out the door, especially when I saw what the Lions ended up getting him for. I think it was 1 year, $6 million or something like that. The Lions just lost Jonah Jackson going up to the Rams, and to immediately replace him with Kevin Zeitler so that they can maintain the strength of their team, which is their offensive line. I think that's one hell of a signing that you're not going to hear about on a lot of publications, but trust me when I say it's important. Thanks for the question. Number 2, how many games do the Steelers win with Russell/Fields? They said win twice on the thing. I don't know why, but it's fine. So this is the first podcast I've done since they also traded for Justin Fields. It's funny because last week on last week's podcast, I said that I couldn't make sense of the fact that no one wanted Justin Fields to be their starting quarterback. And then all these conflicting reports came out about there were other teams that wanted Justin Fields and were offering the Bears better compensation, but Justin chose to go to the Steelers because that was a better situation. Now, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean he could have been a starter somewhere, but the team sucks, so he said no? I find that hard to believe. Does that mean another team offered him a third-round pick, then he told the Bears to say no because he didn't want to go there and they want to do right by him? I know a lot of people are finding that difficult to believe. I think Ryan Poles is a good dude, and he always made it a point to say, hey, I want to do right by Justin Fields. This isn't his fault. We don't want to make it seem like we're running him out of town. We're just about to draft a generational quarterback. It's not your fault, brother. And we're going to get to said generational quarterback later, so I'll save my other point for then. But still, for now, let's get to the actual question. I like the pickup for the Steelers to end up getting Justin Fields, the summary of that, for what, a 6th-round pick? I don't think they have to pick up his option until next year, so they're paying their quarterback room a combined $7 million. As compared to last year, where they were able to win 10 games with 3 different quarterbacks that are all not on the roster anymore. The 3 Steelers quarterbacks threw for a combined 3,400 yards and a touchdown-to-interception ratio of 13-9. Russell Wilson had twice as many touchdowns himself, and he only played 15 games. Their most notable opponents this year, obviously they have to play 6 games against their division. I think all those teams are going to end up being good this year. Yes, even the Browns with Deshaun Watson. But they have Kansas City and the Dallas Cowboys coming to town against them, and they are going on the road against the Eagles and the Falcons. So let's say they split the division. They went 5-1 this year, but a lot of those games were against backups. So do what you want with that record. Let's say they split in the division. Let's say they go 3-3. And let's say they go those 4 games I just listed out: Kansas City, Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons. Let's say they split those 2-2. At 5-5, will they be able to get to 5 more wins on the season or 6 more wins on the season? It's tough, right? Because is Russell Wilson / Justin Fields an upgrade at quarterback? The answer is undeniably yes, right? Like, I think if you polled 100 NFL fans who's better, Russell Wilson or Kenny Pickett, I think 99 of them will say Russell Wilson, and the 100th person will be Kenny Pickett's mom. But do you look at the Steelers and say 11-win team? That's where it's tough for me. We know they're getting a bare minimum of 9 because it's the Steelers. It's Mike Tomlin. They get winning records. It's what they do. Does Russell Wilson make them a game better? I'm going to say yes. Their schedule is a little tougher, but I'm going to say yes. Thanks for the question. Should the Patriots trade the number 3 pick? For y'all that are new, Patriots fan here. Hi, nice to meet you. I've gone back and forth on this. So here's the pro trade the pick side. This roster, dog shit. We have not done any major moves to change this roster from being dog shit. For example, our 3 biggest needs going into this offseason were quarterback, left tackle, wide receiver 1. We are a little over a month away from the draft. We are 0 for 3 on all those things. And we just saw with the Panthers what happens when you don't put good talent around your quarterback, regardless of how good they might be. And maybe Bryce Young ends up not being that good, who knows? But we just saw what it looks like. As opposed to Niners fans, don't jump me. We look at Brock Purdy and he's on an all-star team and he looks great. Granted, he has a baseline level of talent himself or else it would look awful, but you get my point. So that's the part where it's like, okay, would we just literally be burning a pick if we're drafting a quarterback, whether that be Drake May or Jaden Daniels, whoever falls to 3, and be setting them up to fail anyways? Thus, what's the point? The flip side of that is the goal is to never pick this high again. That's where it just becomes, hey, take the franchise quarterback. Because I think the top 3 guys are no doubt surefire franchise quarterbacks. I think they're all special. As I sit here right now in front of the microphone, and as I'm literally putting my mock draft together for next week, I'm at team take the quarterback. Because the goal of building a team is so that you can have a good quarterback to run said team. We're in position to do that already. Why delay that? And also, let's say Drake May or Jaden Daniels. We're going to say Drake May because that's who I have in my mock draft for 3. Spoiler alert. Let's say Drake May ends up being awesome. For the rest of our lives, we are going to be the team that traded away Drake May. Let's not do that. Thanks for the question. Next question. RG3 said Caleb should pull an Eli Manning. Do you agree? No, I do not. At first, I thought that. And that was more so because Bears fans are really fucking annoying. Like, y'all are being gift wrapped a generational quarterback for the first time in your life. And all your team has to do is not fuck it up. And Caleb Williams is going to be awesome. And you know how you know Caleb Williams is a generational quarterback? Because, again, the draft is a month away and none of you have an actual football critique about him. It's nails, it's crying, it's, oh, he wants a piece of the team, it's how dare he not do this combine workout shit that I really don't actually care about. Like, it's not his arm strength is iffy. It's not, I don't like how he reads through his plays. And if you do try to come up with some football stuff, it's he doesn't know how to play in structure, which most of you don't know what that actually means. And if you did know what it means, you know it's not correct. But to the Bears side, here's why he shouldn't pull a Eli, because the Bears, Ryan Poles in the front office, hats off to you in all the ways you failed Justin Fields. I said in the earlier podcast, hey, how do we make sure we don't do the same thing to Caleb Williams? Well, apparently they heard me because they went out and made some moves. They already had DJ Moore. They bought in Keenan Allen, brought in DeAndre Swift. They're strengthening the defense on the other side. They got Garrett Everett as the second tight end to go along with Cole Kmet. They already had Darnell Wright from last year. Now, while they've added depth to their offensive line, I still think they end up grabbing a tackle in this year's draft. And now that they got Keenan Allen, they're probably going to do it at pick number 9. So they have set up Caleb Williams really well to come into this situation. I don't think any first overall pick has ever come into a team that was 7-10 the year before with a defense this good that is going to have 2 veteran number 1 wide receivers to throw to. So if the goal, especially if you're telling me that, oh, he should pull a Eli Manning to avoid going to the Bears' dysfunctional franchise so he can go to the Washington Commanders. Yeah, no, that's a tough sell. Caleb should stay put, go to Chicago, and those Bears fans are going to offer to paint your nails for you the moment you start winning some games. I promise. Thanks for the question. Next question, could you please go back through the cap space explanation from last week? I'd love to. So last week, I tried to explain the difference between the actual way contracts are announced and the way that the cap actually works for the cap space isn't real crowd. So I decided I'm going to use an actual NFL contract as an example now to try to paint the picture a little more clearly. So we're going to use Chris Jones, who signed outside of Kirk Cousins the biggest contract thus far this season. Chris Jones signed a 5-year, $158.75 million contract, $30 million signing bonus, $95 million guaranteed at signing with an annual salary of $31.75 million. That is how it's reported. That's not exactly how it works. You hear that and you hear annual salary of $31.75 million. You're like, oh, he's making $31.75 a year. He's counting $31.75 per year on the cap. That's not true. And also, signing bonus, not exactly how that works either. That is actually going to be dispersed over the next 5 years. So instead of getting $30 million the moment the ink is dry, you're getting $6 million per year for the next 5. Hope I didn't lose you so far. So his actual base salary for his first year of his contract is not $30 million. The base salary in of itself is $1.25 million. The signing bonus adds an extra $6. So the cap hit in total, because there's another $100,000 workout incentive, which is a fluff incentive. If you're not in shape to get on the field, you're not going to get on the field anyways. But, they got to make the numbers seem right. So the actual cap hit is $7.35 million, not 31. But here's what the dead cap number means to bring it back full circle. The money that was guaranteed at signing, which is that $60 million, which is separate from the signing bonus. I know it's weird. The $60 million that was separated from the signing bonus is what would count as the dead cap if you were to cut him immediately, because it's guaranteed at signing. You have to pay him this money because it is guaranteed at signing. Total guarantees and guaranteed money at signing are not the same thing. And I'll explain it to you according to the 33rdteam.com. If you are watching the YouTube video, it should be on the screen. If you're listening, I got you. So guaranteed at signing, like I said, means the second you sign, you earn at least that amount. There's a 99.9% chance you will fully earn it. Why is it not 100? Because there are usually clauses in the contract that says we could void this contract if. So suspended for conduct detrimental to the team, like get arrested, fight somebody, social media rampage, be racist, sexist, homophobic, blah, 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 blah. Non-football related injury that keeps you from honoring the contract. That's why you hear things like, oh, I signed my big deal, I can't play basketball anymore, or I can't skateboard anymore, or whatever the hell. Like, it's, no more rigorous activity that don't have shit to do with football. Your adventure days are over. You're committed to us for $95 million. So as we discussed earlier, that guarantee, that signing bonus, includes the initial signing bonus plus any other salary or roster bonuses that can be thrown on top of it, which is why they're able to spread it out over the course of the year. So it's not necessarily you get all this money guaranteed in perpetuity, so help me God, forever and ever. Not exactly how that works, but pretty close. Next, we have guaranteed for skill, which is if this clause is put into a contract, the money attached to the clause will be guaranteed regardless of if the player's skill decreases. For example, if a player is cut due to poor performance under a guarantee for skill clause, the player would still receive the money. I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory. We can move on. Guaranteed for cap. Clause in the contract means the team cannot try and not pay this player for the reason of a cap concern. Guaranteed for injury. Clause in the contract means the player is guaranteed that money even if they were to get hurt from a football-related injury, because remember, your guarantees can be voided if you get hurt not in football and cannot play. So all these different technicalities and terms, and this salary goes here, this salary goes there. That's why negotiations actually take long, because I know there's people that say, oh, well, when your quarterback comes up, sign a new deal, just take the last deal and add a 1 because you know you have to pay them more than the top market value. That's true technically, but not really. Back to Chris Jones' contract. So that first year, that cap hit is $7.35 million, right? So the second year, that cap hit skyrockets to $34.85 million. But their dead cap, if they were to cut Chris Jones, is now down from $60 million last year and now to $52.75 million this year. Numbers break down. The base salary is $13.75 plus that signing bonus that, remember, dispersed over the time. Another $6 million on that. Another 15 for a quote-unquote roster bonus. And then the $100,000 for the workout bonus, which is don't show up 500 pounds and you get this money. And then the following year, that cap hit goes up to 41. Again, just increasing the money on terms. And this is where restructuring comes into place, right? So let's say next year the Chiefs need to clear, let's say, $5 million in cap space so they could sign another receiver. Just hypothetically speaking, let's say Marquise Brown doesn't work out and they need to bring in another receiver next year. They need $5 more million in cap space to do it. They can go to Chris and say, hey, Chris, my man, you know you're going to get this money, right? Can you do us a favor? And instead of you getting that whole 34.85 this year, can we move that to the following year? So now next year you'll get 46 instead of 41, but this year you'll only get 29. Does that make sense? It's just moving the money back. It's minimum payments on a credit card. It's I know we owe you this, but let me put this on it right now and we'll get back to it next year. I hope that makes sense. Thanks for the question. Next question, where does OBJ fit in team-wise after being released by the Ravens? Now, when I first read this, I wanted to be really snarky until you said team-wise and be like, well, I'm sure he has a couch at home that he could fit in. I just think it's hard for me to think that OBJ has more left in the tank. I think we saw last year that he isn't the same guy. You can only hurt your knee but so many times before you're just not a superstar level receiver anymore. Current moment, he's the third best available wide receiver. It was fourth, but Mike Williams just got signed today. But here's the flip side, which kind of changed my thinking a little bit. Odell last year didn't sign until April 13th, 2023. So we still are about a month away from they'll sign get money contract. You feel me? And there's a lot of young receivers coming in this year's draft. This is one of the deepest receiver drafts we've ever seen. And if you need some veteran leadership in there, it would be great to bring in an Odell to be like, hey, young buck, this is what you do. This is how you save your money. This is how you be a pro, blah, blah, blah. Because Zay Flowers, he credits Odell for a lot of his growth this year. And as we see, Zay Flowers look like he's going to be in the league for quite a while. If he can, never mind, I'm not going to talk about that. There's Zay Flowers allegations that look like they've already been proven to not be true, so I'm not even going to bring them up here, but if you know, you know. So if I had to guess what would be the best fit team-wise, I would say the Packers, because the Packers have that young group of receivers. They have Jordan Love, who's also a young quarterback, so bringing in a veteran like Odell, I think, would do them a great service. Thanks for the question. Thank you all for the questions. Got one last closing segment, and then we're going to wrap all this up. All right, so in the current media landscape, especially in sports media, it's been a lot of going back and forth, a lot of shots between media members, and quite honestly, I don't like it. I don't like the cat fight. Everything turns to the housewives, and no shade to the housewives. You do what you do, but I just want to be the change I want to see in the world. So I want to introduce a segment, which is, I'll find an actual name for it, but it's like the media member love Shoutout segment. Show some love, give a shout out to a media member that I appreciate this week. And week one, we're starting with Taylor Rooks. The reason I'm shouting out Taylor Rooks is not for the reason you think. So she recently launched a podcast with Joy Taylor by the name of Too Personal, which TaylorMade was right there, but sure. And it has absolutely nothing to do with sports, which my favorite thing is my sports people not talking about sports, because they talk about everything the way they talk about sports, with the exception of Taylor Rooks. And her and Joy get incredibly vulnerable on that show in a way that almost caught me off guard, in a positive way, because I genuinely look up to Taylor Rooks as a media member. When I think of who I want to be in sports media, as far as career path and interview style and the way they carry themselves, Taylor Rooks is one of those people. She has this kind of like regal Oprah-esque type presence to her every time you see her on screen. And seeing her on this podcast, I don't know, dog, it's kind of nice to just see her be a human. As I refer to the regalness, every time I see her do Thing X, like we'll take the Lil Wayne interview, for example, I'm like, oh, that's dope. I want to interview Lil Wayne like Taylor Rooks did. In the back of my mind, I'll be like, man, you don't have an ounce of regal like she does. You're not, if you're listening to me, you know I'm like nearly as refined as Taylor Rooks is. But when I see that, oh, she could be a vulnerable person. She's not royalty all the time. It's like, all right, great. We're good. And I don't know, man, that just did something to my psyche that really made me appreciate it. I know it may seem small, but I genuinely do appreciate being able to see that other side of Taylor Rooks. So thank you for that. In the event that Taylor Rooks by some miracle ends up seeing this, thank you, Taylor. I appreciate you. The second one, this was a very late edition because I very literally just watched this podcast about an hour before I started recording this. LeBron James and JJ Redick just launched a combined podcast called Mind the Game, and it is deep talk basketball. You had to have played organized basketball to understand what the hell they're talking about sometimes. Some of that shit goes over my head from time to time. They're breaking down the actual game. They're breaking down schematics. They're breaking down game plans. And what really makes me want to shout this show out is JJ Redick complains about the modern media landscape for the NBA, as does LeBron from time to time, but he's not in NBA media yet. I doubt he will be in his post-career, but he's not in NBA media yet, so he doesn't have the platform to do it as much. Instead of JJ continuing to complain, he's now going to be the change that he wants to see. And there's a lot of fans who have similar complaints about modern sports media, period, but NBA media in particular. And to all of you, I say, God damn it, you better support this show. Because if a LeBron James-led show that is doing deep talk basketball isn't successful, you are getting hot take media for the rest of your life. You're never getting deep analysis again. You better get ready to learn Skip Bayless, buddy, because that's all you're getting for the rest of your life. And if it flops, I never want to hear another complaint out of y'all again, because I know I'm going to be locked in every Tuesday. I'm not finna miss an episode because I was locked in immediately the moment they started getting deep talking to basketball. Because you never hear LeBron get to talk like that. They're usually asking him stupid questions. And JJ's usually yelling back and forth with Mad Dog about whether Bob Cousy was a plumber or not. So to now have this as an alternative, I love it. So I'm happy to see it. Shout out to JJ and LeBron. And I know there's some of y'all that are like, why will LeBron get a white co-host? Relax, who cares? All right, that concludes today's show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Remember, like, follow, subscribe at BKA Beloved on all platforms. And thank you for listening.